Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we're diving into an exciting story exploring the possibilities of Deku having Lady Nagant's quirk. Imagine the impact this would have on Izuku's fate. To discover the thrilling twists and turns, make sure to watch the entire story. But before we jump in, I kindly ask you to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your encouragement fuels my passion for creating more engaging, what-if scenarios like this on a regular basis. Alright, let's get started. Inko was working on dinner when she received a phone call. After setting the knife down on the counter, Inko pulled out her phone. Without even needing the caller ID, she already knew it was her husband. "Hey Hisashi, are you headed home from work?" Inko said, familiar with this routine, as her husband liked to always call her whenever he was driving home. A weird habit only Hisashi had, as all her friends' husbands rarely did anything of the sort. Most days it was just routine, but sometimes it was a helpful reminder of when dinner needed to be ready. "I am honey, but I have good news. I got a call from the hospital a few minutes ago. Kaina just came out of labor," Hisashi said as excitement filled his voice. "Our nephew was just born." Inko froze as the news entered her mind. She had to go over it a few times before everything made sense. Once it did, she screamed, "Wait, what do you mean? Kaina already had her baby. But he wasn't due for another week. And how are you acting so calm?" Inko knew she should be excited for her sister, as this was the day the three of them had been waiting for since Kaina first learned she was pregnant. Yet to hear the news so suddenly, Inko's worrisome mindset was acting up. Honey, everything is okay. I'll be home to pick you up in a few minutes, then we can head over together. I'm sure your sister will appreciate our company," Hisashi said, reassuring his wife that everything is fine. Yet he was failing. As Inko had been talking to him, she had turned off the stove and ran into the nearest bathroom. Grabbing a comb, she began to brush out of the mess she had since waking up. As she brushed her hair, she said, "No Hisashi, everything is not okay. We were supposed to have a week left to prepare everything. Most of everything won't be ready until Friday. Hisashi, it's Monday." Hisashi laughed a little. "Inko, Kaina and the kid most likely won't be discharged until Thursday at the earliest. We still got some time to make sure everything is in order. I'm pulling into the neighborhood right now." Inko's panic rose even more and she dropped the hairbrush. Unfreezing, she dove up her makeup bag and began searching for lipstick. She wanted the delivery to be perfect, to have everything ready for when her sister and nephew left the hospital. "Honey, what did I just hear fall to the ground? And what did you just unzip?" Hisashi asked. Though he had grown accustomed to how easily his wife could panic at the smallest things, this was almost assuming. This was a time when her panicking was becoming a bigger issue than what she was panicking about. "You realize that we were supposed to have dinner with Miss Tuki and her husband tonight. Katsuki has given them a whole night's rest yet, and isn't supposed to for another 2 months," Inko declared, having read all the baby care books so she could help out her friends. "I already told Masaru and he informed his wife. They're fine, they'll order some takeout," Hisashi said, then realized his mistake. Inko stopped as she did too. "Hisahi." Her voice took a tone as if she was right to tear himself apart like she was an apex predator. "You mean to tell me that you informed the Bakugos of the situation before you informed me, your wife and sister to Kaina?" "I'm sorry," Hisashi said as if begging for his life. Which he basically was doing, but he couldn't tell if it was working. "I'm pulling up to the house right now." That seemed to make Inko refocus. Forgetting the lipstick, Inko splashed some warm water on her face and then ran out of the bathroom. She hurried down the hallway and slid through the living room, using her cord to pull her purse into her hand from the couch. As she did so, stopping at the front door, she knelt down and slipped on her shoes. Once the laces were tied, Inko ripped open the door and dashed out. After barely remembering to lock the door, Inko took off down the walkway. As she reached the road, Hisashi pulled in from the house. Sliding across the hood, Inko threw the passenger door open and got in. Then without so much as a hello or any kind of greeting, Inko looked at Hisashi and said, "Drive." Knowing it was in his best interest to obey his wife's command, Hisashi put his foot down on the gas and tore down the street. Working on getting to the hospital quickly, while making sure not to get pulled over, Hisashi could see the worry growing on his wife's face. "Inko, everything will work out fine," Hisashi said, but noticed that she didn't seem to hear him. She didn't seem to be paying attention to anything around her, until Hisashi pulled into a parking spot and turned the car off. As if the chair was going to shock her, Inko shoved her door open and leapt out of the car. Hisashi had to work fast to get out of the car. As he got away from the car, he looked down the parking lot and saw that Inko was already by the elevator and had pressed the button. Moments later, the elevator dinged and the door opened, forcing Hisashi to run to make it in time. He barely made it, having to squeeze in right before the door closed. He had to lean against the railing to catch his breath. He looked at Inko and said, "I don't want a word out of your mouth. I'm not the one that trained to be a hero. I feel like I'm about to have a heart attack." "I told you, you should start going to the gym more than once a month," Inko said, without taking an eye on the light that indicated which floor they were on. She was barely winded despite having done more running than her husband. Hisashi shook his head as he stood next to Inko. Once they reached floor 6, the door opened and Inko began to move forwards, only to be slowed by her husband. Keeping his arm intertwined with Inko's, Hisashi walked Inko up to the reception desk. "Hello, welcome to floor 6 of Shizuko General. Who are you here to see?" The receptionist asked, looking up from her computer. "Kaina Tsutsumi," Inko said, wanting to see her sister and her nephew. "I'm sorry, we don't have anyone by that name," the receptionist said, without looking at her computer. Hisashi smirked a bit. Despite Kaina being Inko's sister, Hisashi knew more about the political world of heroes than Inko did. Hisashi knew Kaina wouldn't use her real name, as whenever a heroine got pregnant, they usually did their best to keep it a secret. And Kaina had done her best to hide her pregnancy. The fact the photos the media managed to get of her were always from a distance helped, making it hard to see her baby bump. Not that she really had one. Then try Kar Midoriya. "We're her sister and brother-in-law," Hisashi said, giving the name he had helped Kaina set up in preparation for all this. The receptionist smiled as she did a quick look over at her computer. Then she stood up and gestured down the hallway. "She's in room 628. Please be quiet, she hasn't had much time to recover." "Thank you," Hisashi said with a nod, then pulled Inko away from the desk. As they walked down the hallway, Inko's demeanor changed. "Hisashi, are we ready for the responsibility?" Inko asked, hugging herself. Hisashi stopped, then turned around and said, "Nope, let's go home. I'm sure your sister will be fine." Hisashi began walking in the opposite direction, but before he could get too far, Inko used her quirk and grabbed Hisashi by his shirt collar. Once Hisashi felt his shirt start to pull him back, he stopped and chuckled. He then turned and walked back to Inko, placing an arm over her shoulder. "We've done everything we can to prepare, but for things like this, sometimes your best isn't to be prepared for everything, but doing your best to adapt to the unknown." Inko hugged Hisashi and cried a bit into his shirt. Hisashi hugged Inko until she stopped crying. Once she stopped, she looked up at her husband and he asked, "Are you ready to go in?" Inko nodded, so together they took the last few steps to room 628, where Hisashi knocked on the door. A few moments later, a voice called out, "Who is it?" The voice sounded exhausted, but unable to sleep. "It's Inko and Hisashi," Inko said, in a calm voice. "Inko, it's good to hear your voice. You can come in, if you leave your baggage in the hallway," the voice said, with a little humor in it. Hisashi gave a fake laugh and opened the door. "Obviously you're not that tired if you're able to joke about that." Hisashi and Inko walked in and saw Kaina leaning against her bed. Her breath was slow, and her eyelids were half closed. She tilted her head and despite being very pale, she gave a small smile as she saw the two. "Hisashi, I'm going to be able to joke about that on my deathbed," Kaina said, her smile turning into a smirk. "Come on you two, let's not go there right now," Inko said, as she walked over and gave Kaina a little hug. "It's good to see you again. How is everything?" Kaina nodded her head over to a small tub that had a blanket poking over the edge. "I was barely in labor for an hour. It seemed like the little sucker wanted to come out," Kaina said, then noticed the worry on her sister's face. "Inko, he's fine. Despite being a week early, the doctor gave him a clean bill of health. So what are you thinking about naming him?" Hisashi asked, walking over to the tub and looking at the newborn that lay inside. The newborn was wrapped tight in a swaddle and was fast asleep. "I thought I would leave that up to his parents," Kaina said. Inko took a shuddered breath and almost fell to the floor. "Inko, that's why you left training. You wanted to have a family, something you have been trying to have for 3 years now. That is the whole reason I carried him." Inko looked her sister in the eyes and asked, "Are you sure?" Using all of her strength and willpower, Kaina leaned forwards and gave her younger sister a hug. "I'm sure. It's not like my work will give me the time to be a proper mother. I want him to grow up with that in his life." Kaina broke the embrace and looked Inko in the eyes. "Hey, that doesn't mean I won't be there when I can. I'm the one that went through all this. I'm going to see him grow up. So what are you going to name him?" "Izuku Midoriya," Inko said, walking over and seeing her nephew for the first time. Inko looked back at Kaina, who simply nodded. 3 days later, Kaina and Izuku were discharged from the hospital. As Hisashi was unavailable, Inko picked them up and drove them home. At Hisashi and Inko's house, Inko carried Izuku while slowly walking next to Kaina. Unlocking the front door, Inko helped Kaina through the living room and to the ground floor guest room. After skillfully slipping Izuku into the bassinet that had arrived early, Inko sat down on the bed next to her sister. Together they sat on the bed in silence for a few minutes. "Do you remember the day you told me you weren't going to train with me with the Hero Public Safety Commission anymore?" Kaina asked, then took a small drink of water. "Yeah, at first you seemed disappointed, but then you smiled and gave me a hug. You told me that I should follow my own path, no matter how different it was from yours," Inko said, looking at her sister. Kaina nodded and looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Instead, she chose to say, "You seemed so happy. I never saw you smile as brightly as when you talked about Hisashi. I hope you two will always know how much I love seeing you together, despite how often Hisashi and I butt head." "I know you do," Inko said, giving Kaina a mischievous grin. Kaina chuckled and lightly punched her sister in the arm. Over the coming months, Kaina worked herself back into top shape to go back to being a pro hero. Once she returned, she held a press conference telling everyone that she had a family issue that took all of her attention. As Izuku grew, Kaina visited him and her sister as much as she could. However, with her agency only 2 cities away, her visits were not as often as she wanted to be, becoming less and less frequent as she got back into being Lady Nagant and the HPSC giving her more missions. Yet she tried her hardest to see her son, but that all stopped one day. On that one fateful day when the world she had disillusioned herself with shattered with a single gunshot. Izuku was 4 years old when it happened. His mother Inko was taking him to the local park to start the weekend off right. As they walked into the general area of the park, Inko's phone went off. Inko pulled her phone out and saw she was getting a call from Kaina. Curious about what her sister might want to talk about, Inko answered the call and held the phone up to her ear. However, before she could say a word, Kaina yelled, "Inko. Thank God you picked up. What's wrong, Kaina? Why are you calling?" Inko asked, immediately noticing the stress of worry in Kaina's voice. Inko felt herself begin to worry about her sister worrying, so she had to take a few deep breaths. "Inko, I need you to listen to me. What I'm about to say is going to be confusing, but I need you to listen to me," Kaina said, sounding out of breath. That made Inko extremely worried, as she hadn't heard Kaina lose her breath. Not after training with the HPSC. Kaina wasn't out of breath because she was tired, no, she was stressed. Inko could feel herself start using the training she got alongside Kaina on how to deal with stressful situations. "Alright, what do you need to tell me? You're going to see my hero name in the news in the coming days. It will probably be about a fight I had between some other pro heroes. Just know that whatever they say isn't the truth," Kaina said in an anxious tone, as the wind rushed by, making it hard for Inko to hear her sister. "Then what is the truth?" Inko asked, hearing gravel being moved from Kaina's end of the call. That told Inko that her sister was being chased, but from who and why? "Is that Aunt Kaina?" Izuku asked, tugging on Inko's pant leg. "It is, honey. We're in a serious conversation right now and she needs to tell me something," Inko said, then just heard Kaina sigh a sad breath of air. "What is the truth, Kaina? I'm sorry, but it's better if you don't know the whole story. Just now I'm going somewhere and I'm gone for a while," Kaina said. Inko's mind deciphered the code as Kaina was going to get arrested. "My God, Kaina, what did you do?" Inko asked, looking around as if someone was hunting her and Izuku. She scanned the crowd, a new couple walking their dog around the park. A street vendor selling snow cones. Just other people doing normal daily tasks, none gave off malicious intent. "I'm sorry I can't tell you that. But there's something you can promise. Do you know how we talked about the future when Izuku starts to ask specific kinds of questions? Do you remember that conversation?" Kaina asked as she caught her breath. "I do," Inko asked, grabbing Izuku's hand and pulling him over to a park bench. Her eyes are still scanning the crowd around her. A few new people had shown up, but still, none seemed to have the intent to harm Inko or Izuku. "You remember how we would bring up our situation and explain the truth to him? About everything," Kaina said. Her voice was still stressed, but it seemed to be calming down a bit. Talking to her sister always calmed Kaina down, no matter what was stressing her out. "I do," Inko said as she looked down at Izuku. "I need you to promise that doesn't happen. Whenever Izuku starts asking those questions, tell him whatever lies will convince him the most. Anything but the truth, it would be best if he knows. It will save him from a world of pain and hurt. A legacy he doesn't need to be a part of. Can you promise me that?" Kaina asked. Inko took in a sharp breath and then asked, "Why? Why are you asking me to do all that? I know right now that this all sounds confusing, but when you hear the lies of the media you'll start to understand. For now, all I can tell you is it would be for the best if you and your family didn't have any connection to the name of Kaina Tsutsumi or Lady Nagant. As my younger sister, can you do that?" Kaina said, her voice sounded like metal being sharpened. "Just tell me why. Why do I have to promise this? And I'll agree," Inko said. Yet Kaina didn't answer for a bit. Inko could feel her heart rate skyrocket as she waited for her older sister to answer. Inko looked around the crowd. It was clear her sister was hunting. Maybe she was too. Their relationship wasn't publicly known, only those from their childhood knew Kaina and Inko were sisters. Inko never really wanted to become a hero, that's why she married Hisashi and quickly told his last name. She just wasn't meant for the limelight, but both sisters loved each other too much just to leave each other behind. Finally, Kaina answered Inko's request. Just a single sentence, "I'm sorry I won't be around lil sis, but we trusted the wrong people." Inko's world shattered as she heard her sister say those words, then to hear the phone call disconnect. Her sister was being hunted by someone from their past. Someone they had once trusted, and if they were hunting Kaina, chances were they would start to hunt Inko and her family. Inko looked down at Izuku, Kaina's son. The little boy who she was given to protect from the world. She wasn't going to let him be hunted too. Over the next year, Inko kept her promise and never mentioned her sister or her pro-hero persona. After seeing the new broadcast and seeing that Lady Nagant had been arrested for killing 2 pro-heroes, Inko understood why Kaina didn't want Izuku to learn the truth. Her sister had been branded as a terrorist and an S-grade villain. If people knew that she was Lady Nagant's sister or Izuku was her biological son, they would view them differently. Inko didn't want to have that on Izuku's consciousness. It would make him question who he truly was. With Hisashi's connections, it was easy to erase Inko's connection to her sister. Her having Hisashi's last name and Izuku being born under the Midoriya name streamlined everything. But that was never going to be the easy part. Izuku was a smart kid, and when he realized how different his quirk was from Inko and just saw his quirk, he would begin to ask questions. At first, it was easy to answer Izuku's question about where Aunt Kaina was, and why she wasn't visiting anymore. A simple lie of how she was too busy to visit was enough to satisfy Izuku's curiosity, but Inko knew that wasn't going to last for very long. She worked every day to mentally prepare herself for the day she had to tell the biggest lie in her life. Inko thought she was ready for that day, but when it happened she wasn't. It had started out like any other day with Inko waking Izuku up for kindergarten. Izuku was slowly waking up, brushing his purple hair out of his face. After a few minutes, he was awake enough to get out of bed and get dressed. Walking down the hallway, Izuku began scratching his right arm. When Inko noticed, she asked, "Is there something wrong with your arm, Izuku?" Izuku continued to scratch his arm. "It feels sore and itchy." "Oh, you just probably slept on it weird. It could happen to anyone. Let's focus on breakfast and getting you to school," Inko said, in a lullaby tone of voice she used whenever she wanted Izuku to do something without arguing. Despite the constant tingly feeling in his arm, Izuku focused on his and his mother's routine to get him ready for school. After a quick breakfast and brushing of teeth, Inko drove Izuku to kindergarten. Walking him up to the front door, Inko noticed that Izuku was still scratching his arm. "Is your arm still sore, honey?" Inko said, crouching to be at eye level with her son. "Yeah, but it's not as bad as it was before," Izuku said, putting on a cute tough guy face. This caused Inko to laugh and hug Izuku. "Well, try not to think about it too much. If it still feels weird after school, we'll take it to the doctor and see what's wrong with it," Inko said. Izuku nodded, then walked into school. Throughout the day, Izuku did his best to ignore how sore and irritated his arm was. Yet the feeling only got stronger and stronger through the day. Until after lunch, when everyone headed outside to play in the yard. At that point, Izuku couldn't withstand the feeling in his arm anymore. Once he was outside, he stepped aside and attacked his arm. Yet the feeling never went away, even after his arm was red. As he continued to scratch his arm, he watched as the other kids kicked a ball around. They were enjoying themselves until Izuku's best friend Katsuki Bakugo got a hold of the ball and accidentally kicked it a little too hard. It bounded out of the play set and ricocheted into a nearby tree. All the kids walked over to the tree and took turns jumping up and trying to knock the ball out of the tree. "Maybe we should get one of the teachers to help," a kid suggested as another kid attempted and failed to retrieve the ball. None of them were getting close. "Nah, we don't need their help," Bakugo said confidently, as he was the only one that was even getting remotely close to the branch that the ball was resting in. Though he was still a good few centimeters away. "But none of us can jump high enough to get it," another kid pointed out. Izuku pushed himself off of the building and began walking over, thinking he could help. Bakugo noticed Izuku and smiled, as despite being one of the shorter students, Izuku was the most athletic. "Why don't we let Izuku give it a try? He's sure to get it down, and then we won't have to ask the adults for help." Izuku looked up at the tree. He was a good jumper, but even then he didn't think he would be able to reach up that high. "I don't know, Koch-chan. I agree with the others, it would be better to get one of the teachers. Besides, why don't you use your quirk to knock it down?" Izuku said, looking at his best friend. Bakugo scoffed and said, "Yeah, then I'll get in trouble for using my quirks. I guess you're just afraid that you can't jump that high." Izuku knew that Bakugo was just baiting him, and honestly, he didn't care. To Izuku, it was Bakugo's way of saying that he really thought Izuku would be able to do it. Izuku judged the height he would have to jump again, then said, "I guess it won't hurt to try. But if I can't get it, then we should ask one of the teachers to get it for us." All the kids nodded in agreement, while Bakugo just clicked his tongue at how easily Izuku could make people agree with him. Izuku backed up a bit to get a running start, signaling to everyone to give him a clear path. Once everyone had taken a big step away from the tree, then Izuku took off. As he got close to the tree, he pulled his arms back and then swung them up as he launched himself upwards. As he rose up through the air, he reached his hands up, aiming for the ball. As he began to reach the apex of his jump, it looked like he would be able to get the ball. But as it turned out, he was still a few millimeters too short. As he began to fall, he tried to force his arm to stretch off, to knock the ball out of the tree. Suddenly his right arm screamed out in pain, and steam started to appear around it. Izuku felt his right forearm expand and bugled, increasing in size, while his hand stretched out in length as it became narrow. His hand shot out, knocking the ball from the tree. Together Izuku and the ball fell to the ground. As Izuku landed, he fell to his knees, holding his right arm tight against his chest. Pain exploded through his arm, just to disappear, only then to reappear. As he held his transformed arm against his chest, the pain began to slowly decrease. At that moment, the principal of the school noticed all the kids standing by the tree. As she walked over, she asked, "Is everything alright?" The kids looked at Izuku, watching as his dark purple hair began to change. It was no longer a single color, patches and strips of green were spread through Izuku's hair. Bakugo looked at Principal Nozomi and said, I think Izuku just got his quirk. Being an old friend of Inko from the middle, Principal Ineko Nozomi knew Inko and Kaina. They had both been bridesmaids at Inko and Jisahi's wedding, meaning she was one of the few people Inko told about Izuku's situation. Knowing that it needed to be kept a secret, Principal Nozomi quickly knelt down in front of Izuku and whispered, Midoriya, I need to see your arm. Izuku slowly nodded and revealed his hand to her. While Inko and Kaina always believed Izuku would inherit Kaina's quirk, there was a small chance Izuku inherited the quirk of whoever his father was. If he had, then life for him would have been much simpler going forever. Yet once Principal Nozomi saw Izuku's right arm, she knew that no one else could see it. Izuku, can you transform it back? She whispered. Izuku shook his head. The feeling in his arm was completely new, and he couldn't control it. Principal Nozomi knew she needed to act fast, so she slipped her suit jacket off and put it over Izuku. Then she looked to Bakugo and said, Can you please inform Mr. Bashir that he'll need to come out? I need to take Midoriya to my office. Bakugo nodded and took off while Principal Nozomi held Izuku to his feet. She walked him through the yard and inside the building. Quickly walking through the schoolhouse to her office, Principal Nozomi locked the door as she and Izuku were in. She instructed Izuku to sit in one of the chairs as she walked over to her desk and dialed Inko's phone number. Once the line connected, Principal Nozomi said, Hello Inko, I hope you're having a good day. That's good to hear. I'm calling because Izuku's quirk appeared. Sadly, it's Kaina. Nearly a perfect match, even down to the hair changing. No one else had seen his arm, not even the other kids. You came to me because you trusted me. It's okay for now. We're in my office right now. However, there's an issue. He doesn't know how to transform it back. I think it would be best if you got here as soon as possible. I wouldn't be able to hold him in my office all day without some questions being asked. The Principal Nozomi was quiet for a second, then said, Okay, I'll let the front desk know. See you in a few. She ended the phone call and then walked over to Izuku. She crouched down and looked Izuku in the eye, then said, Your mom is going to be here in a few minutes, okay? How are you feeling? Izuku suddenly smirked for some reason, then held out his left hand and said, I know how my arm was so itchy. He opened his left hand and inside his palm was a small glass marble. This got inside. Principal Nozomi looked at the marble extremely confused. A question that won't be answered until Inko arrived. Luckily it was in a timely manner. Her arrival was announced when a knock came on the door. Principal Nozomi walked over and opened the door. She hustled Inko inside, then closed and locked the door. Principal Nozomi quickly explained how Izuku was trying to get a ball out of a tree. With that information, Inko knelt in front of her son and with a smile said, Izuku, I'm going to need to take a look at your arm. Can you show it to me? Izuku slowly nodded and extended his right arm from within the jacket. Inko was surprised to see Izuku's arm, then she looked at her friend. Principal Nozomi had said that it was almost a perfect match, but Izuku's arm looked nothing like Kaina's, while Kaina's rifle extended out of her elbow, contorting her lower arm against her shoulder. An aspect of her sister's quirk Inko honestly found disgusting. Yet instead of that, Izuku's entire forearm had transformed into the rifle. His forearm had transformed into the stock and main body of a long-range rifle, while his entire hand had stretched and narrowed into the barrel. It looked like a streamlined version of Kaina's quirk, meaning it had evolved and was more powerful. But now was not the time for testing Izuku's quirk. Would be fine if I took Izuku home for the rest of the day? Inko asked, looking over at her old friend. Principal Nozomi nodded and said, It's standard practice for a kid to go home early when their quirk first comes in. And between you and me, if you need the rest of the week, take it. Inko nodded, then looked back at her son. She could help him learn his quirk later, for right now he needed to transform his arm back. Having trained with Kaina with the HPSC, Inko and her sister learned a lot about each other's quirks. Kaina has talked about how it was hard to keep her quirk from forming when she was stressed. For something like this to happen must have been really stressful for Izuku. Using the only method Inko and Kaina used to calm each other down, Inko gently pressed her index finger against Izuku's chest and said, Izuku, I want you to close your eyes and breathe slowly as you listen to my voice. Izuku nodded and closed his eyes. Emotion starts in the heart, the core of a person's soul. It flows through the lungs and swells with power. Inko traced her finger down to Izuku's midsection, then it flows through veins and moves the body. Inko brought her finger back up Izuku's chest and towards his shoulder. It goes from a person's feet to the end of the hand. Inko's finger slowly went to Izuku's shoulder, then down his arm. As Inko's finger slowly approached Izuku's elbow, steam began to appear around Izuku's lower arm. His arm slowly transformed back into a normal arm as Inko's finger traveled down, ending by slipping off of Izuku's middle finger. Izuku took a deep breath and felt his entire body relax. Everything is going to be okay, sweetie, Inko said, wrapping Izuku in a tight hug. They continued to hug each other for a few minutes. After they were done, Inko gave her friend her jacket back and thanked her. Inko walked Izuku out to the car, and together they went home. At home, Inko made Izuku a small snack of rice, then they sat down at the kitchen table. As Izuku slowly ate his rice, he looked at his mother and asked, "Why weren't others allowed to see my quirk? Is there something wrong with it?" Inko wanted to kick herself for her luck. Of course, Izuku would ask the question that got to the heart of the issue. Inko had to think of something quickly, then her eyes fell on Izuku's All Might shirt. A lie that would be believed and easy to remember formed in her mind. "Izuku, you know how the world is protected by All Might." Inko began and Izuku nodded his head. "Well, it wasn't always like that. Bad people were hidden in the world's shadows, and they craved power. Imagine if someone bad got a hold of All Might when he was young and taught him to hate the world." Izuku shook his head and said, No, I want to." Inko panicked and hugged Izuku. "It's okay, the world isn't like that, but I worry about you a lot. Your father and I have always known you would have a powerful quirk, but you're gonna have to learn how to control it, to use it to protect others. But until then it's best not everyone knew about your quirk. Can you do that for me?" Inko asked, holding back a grimace. She knew that probably wasn't the best way to explain everything, but she couldn't take back anything she said. This was the lie she was going to have to live with for her life. Izuku thought about it for a second. The world was filled with powerful quirks, heroes that used them to protect others. What would happen if one of those heroes was raised to be a villain? How different would the world be? If he had a powerful and amazing quirk, then he needed to choose the path of hero. But there was one thing he wanted to do. "Can I at least show it to Koch-chan?" Inko had to stop herself from bursting out laughing. Of all the things Izuku was going to say, asking to share his quirk with his best friends should have been the first thing she expected to hear. She gave a light chuckle, then rubbed Izuku's hair. "How about you learn how to control your quirk before you show it, Katsuki, okay?" Izuku nodded with an understanding of his mother's words. Izuku spent the rest of the day playing in his room, while Inko figured out how to test her son on how to use his quirk without making her seem too knowledgeable. It began with taking Ineko's offer to take the rest of the week off. The next day Inko began teaching Izuku to control his quirk. It started with Izuku learning just what his quirk was. Inko explained to him that his quirk allowed him to transform his right arm into a long-range rifle, with the ability to fire a bullet. Inko worked with Izuku to learn how to control his quirk's transformation, and only be active when he wanted it to. Something Izuku picked up on naturally quickly, and had a good handle on by the time Inko served lunch. Inko spent the afternoon subtly giving clues that Izuku was supposed to use his dual-colored hair to weave bullets to use. By the time dinner rolled around, Inko was about to spell everything out for her son, but as he sat down, he brushed some hair out of his face. He commented how his hair somehow weaved in on itself. It took Izuku a bit more for him to figure out how to weave his hair into a bullet. He needed to twirl it around his finger a couple of times. Once he figured it out, he slipped the bullet through the small opening that was on the side of his forearm. Izuku felt the bullet slip into place, and he excitedly jumped out of his chair and pointed his arm at the wall. Without much of a warning, Izuku flexed his arm and a gunshot rang through the house. "Izuku!" Inko screamed as she reached out and grabbed the speeding bullet with her quirk. The bullet glowed green as it slowed down, then stopped in midair. The next moment it flew straight into Inko's outstretched hand. As the bullet landed in her hand, Inko had to catch her breath. That was a use of her quirk she hadn't used in a long time. She flashed a stern look at Izuku, then in a calm voice said, "Alright, rule number 1. No firing your quirk inside." "Sorry, Mom," Izuku said, transforming his arm back into its normal form. Inko sighed as she walked over to hug Izuku and say, "It's okay, honey. When I first figured out my quirk, I wanted to see what I could do with it. I accidentally pulled a hot piece of metal into my hand. Let's just be careful of how we use our quirks." Izuku nodded as he hugged his mother back. Inko and Izuku spent the evening resting from working on Izuku's quirk. Once the sun went down together, Izuku went to bed while Inko went looking through her closet for a vanilla folder. Once she found what she was looking for, she pulled out a vanilla folder that had Project Velocity stamped on the front. Inko walked back to the kitchen table and sat down. She put the vanilla folder on the table and then opened it. Inside were summaries of the different training she and Kaina did as teenagers. She then came across a photo of them trying out their new hero suits, testing to see if they liked them. Lady Nagant was written over Kaina's photo while Summoner was written over Inko's. But that wasn't what Inko was looking for. Moving to the back of the folder, Inko located a business card of her and Kaina's old HPSC handler. Inko knew she could teach Izuku how to use his quirk, but that was about it. For the skills for Izuku to effectively use his quirk, she was going to need some extra help about that. Depending on what point you looked at Fumiko Mario's career, you could easily call it a complete success or an utter failure. Before he submitted the idea of Project Velocity, 16 years ago he was a simple low-end hero public safety commission worker. It was a simple 9-to-5 job that let Mario in a bit of luxury, yet he never felt he was truly accomplishing anything. Which led to the birth of Project Velocity, a program to find young teenagers with powerful quirks and train them to become better pro-heroes. After months of debating, the program was green light, and Mario was promoted to head director. After the program started, Mario's luck didn't slow down. Within 2 months the first trainees were found. A pair of sisters. The older one had the ability to form a powerful rifle out of her elbow, and the younger sister had a weak form of telekinesis. In the beginning, Project Velocity was going to reject the younger sister, but a deal was made with the older sister, as she would only join the program if her younger sister was allowed to train alongside her. It was long that Mario was grateful he took the deal, as the months of training back before sister progressed faster than previously expected. All due to the sister pushing each other to their limits and becoming better. By the time the young sister was a senior in high school, they were on the level of many top pro heroes. One perfected long-range encounters, while the other became the nation's top closest quarters fighter, and together there was no challenger, no opponent they couldn't fight against and win. Yet not everything could last forever. Though the younger sister happily trained alongside her sister, Mario noticed she didn't have the same drive to become a pro hero as her older sister. So when she eventually met a charming man, she quickly got married and left the life of a hero. Mario would admit the wedding was beautiful, but the HPSC wasn't too happy about losing a valuable asset. Luckily for Mario, the older sister stepped up in her career and become a well-known hero. Her success in the billboard and media proved Project Velocity was a success. Then the older just had to go and ruin everything by killing the head of the HPSC. When Mario received the call that Lady Nagant had killed the president of the HPSC, he knew he had to protect his program at any cost. He worked tirelessly the following week, then stood in front of the board of the HPSC. The worth of Project Velocity was brought into question, and whether the success achieved was worth the end results. Mario fought hard to keep the program alive and under his command. In the end, Project Velocity was kept alive, but Mario had to hand over most of his control to the board of the HPSC. And a deal was made that Mario would only be kept on if he found a suitable replacement for Lady Nagant within the month. Luckily fate was in Mario's favor, and only 6 months later he was about to find a kid that was about to save over 50 people. He began to immediately train the kid in his quirk, and within 6 months the kid was on track to be the perfect replacement for Lady Nagant. He was excellent in all aspects of his training, and exceed every test given to him by the HPSC board. He did so enough that the new president of the HPSC stated that like the previous trainees of Project Velocity, Takami was growing faster than expected. At Takami's ear test, he blew all of his records out of the water. So much that Mario thanked his superiors before telling a member of his team to buy Takami a gift to keep him in high spirits. Mario then drove home to celebrate his newfound success. As soon as he got home, ordered his favorite takeout, and as he waited for the food to arrive, he searched his drink rack and found a bottle of Kurosawa Samurai 1-10. Returning to his dining room just as the food arrived, Mario was about to sit down and enjoy the success of his life's work. Or he planned to if it was not for his phone ringing. Groaning, he stood up from the table and walked up to his couch from his suit jacket. Fishing his phone out, Mario saw that it was an unknown number. Damn it, Kinkito, this better not be you. That's your 7th phone in the past 4 months. Mario said, because who else would have his phone but their contact not be saved? He walked back to the table, and then answered the phone. What is it, Kinkito? Good to hear that you haven't fired Kinkito yet. A voice came through. A voice that was the start of his downfall. A voice that he honestly didn't think he would hear ever again, nor did he really want to. Hold on, if I'm going to talk with you then I'm going to need a drink first. Mario said as he put the phone on the table and he popped the cork on his drink. After pouring a small bit of alcohol and drinking it, Mario looked back at the phone. Alright, who is this? I thought that's what the drink was for, Mario, sir. Inko said, her voice taking a light-hearted tone. Inko Midoriya, as I live and breathe. What could possibly possess you to call me after what you and your sister did to Project Velocity? Mario said as he poured himself another glass. It was a few moments before Inko spoke again. When she did, it was soft and controlled. Sir, I did not call you to air out any grievance, but I know my sister, and I didn't always show our appreciation for what you did for us. Me leaving the program at such a crucial time was wrong to do, and what my sister did by killing those other heroes. Mario shook his head as he had to remember the lie the HPSC had created for the media. Mario and his team had worked hard and fast to cover that mess up, yet from the way Inko spoke, she knew that wasn't the truth. Mario found that strange, but if she knew the truth then why would be calling? She would never trust the HPSC again if she knew the truth. Well, thank you for that. So what do I owe the pleasure of your call? Mario asked, now his curiosity piqued by this. He needed to know if Inko knew the truth behind Project Velocity. If she knew, then no matter how well Takami did on his test, if Inko released that information, then Mario could end up in Tartarus alongside Kaina. Sir, the day my sister got arrested she called me. Mario began to panic as there had been no information of Lady Nagant making a call, as the HPSC chased her down. Perhaps Inko knew the truth. I was the last one she talked to before she was captured. Sir, the way she spoke, it sounded like she was being framed for killing those pro-heroes. In her final words to me she told me that we trusted the wrong person, and now I believe that same person might try to hunt me and my family down. I thought we had trained you to protect yourself in this situation, and your husband is in America right now. Mario said, still trying to figure out if Inko knew the truth. It was clear she didn't believe the story told to the media, but she didn't know the actual story. Apparently, Kaina didn't reveal any of that information. Mario heard Inko take a deep breath, and then say, "Sir, Kaina had a son." Mario almost choked on his own tongue. Kaina had a child, yet she was never married, and how did she hide it from the media, let alone Mario and his team? She did her best to hide it from everyone, including the HPSC. In the end, knowing her job won't allow her to be a proper mom, she gave her son to Hisashi and me to raise. He gained his quirk today, and honestly, I don't know how to train him. To teach him how to use my sister's quirk without bringing up our past, I can't do that. I need help, and you and Project Velocity are the only people I know that can do so. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was wanting to make up for past mistakes, to prove that the first trainees of Project Velocity were not such a big failure as the HPSC Council thought they were. Mario absorbed all this new information. Inko didn't know the truth, and because of that she still trusted Project Velocity. Kaina had a son who had the same quirk as her, meaning it would just be if not more powerful. If Mario could train this kid to be a hero, then along with Takami, the HPSC would have two well-trained heroes on their peril. Well, Mrs. Midoriya, it sounds like your family has many secrets it's kept, but your position sounds troublesome. And though there has been rough terrain between us in the past, what kind of servant would I be to this nation if I turned you and your son away? Mario said, pouring a third drink. He grabbed it as he stood up from the table and began to pace the room. Thank you, Mario, sir. Inko said. I'll inform the HPSC Council of our conversation and inform you when a time has been set apart for you, and, Mario said as he swirled the alcohol in the glass. Izuku Midoriya. Inko said. Izuku to come into the faculty. Oh, and Mrs. Midoriya, will there be any baggage this time? Mario said as he remembered Kaina's demeanor that despite Inko's quirk not becoming powerful, Kaina would only train in Project Velocity if her sister could join her. It had taken many long nights for Mario to decide on the deal. To keep Izuku from learning of his past, he has not been informed of Kaina being his mother. He has always been registered as a Midoriya, and I would like to keep it that way. That is all I ask for. Inko said. I understand. Your sister might have been framed for her misdoing, but to save your son from the public eye, I will grant that request. No one will be informed of your son's actual parents. Mario said as he raised his drink as if giving a toast. Takemi had kept the program alive, but it was going to be Izuku that showed the nation of Japan the success of Project Velocity. Good night, Mario, and thank you. Inko said. Good night, Mrs. Midoriya. Mario said, then ended the call as he downed the rest of his drink. The day was glorious, but it was at night when true victory was achieved. Mario knew he couldn't let his opportunity waste away, so he needed to work fast. Switching over to contacts, Mario pulled up Hinkito's number and called it. After the third ring, the call connected and Hinkito opened with, "Good evening, sir, what do you need?" "Hinkito, how would you feel about working some overtime?" Mario asked as he focused on getting everything ready. The timing of this was critical. He needed everything ready for when he stood in front of the HPSC Council. They would find out about his team training Izuku, and if they feared a pasting repeat, then Mario would most certainly be kicked from the program. And then control would go to someone else, something Mario couldn't let happen. On what, sir? Hinkito asked. Making Project Velocity what it was always meant to be. Mario said, with the plan of no longer allowing his career to be a laughingstock. Over the coming week, Mario worked with his team to get ready for Inko and Izuku's visit to their training faculty. Mario was vague on the details of the visit, as he didn't want the council to catch wind of it before he wanted them to. Mario and his team worked day and night, recovering the Tsutsumi sisters' files, their training regiment, and ordering new gear. Each day Mario could see his vision of Project Velocity coming closer and closer to becoming close. Once everything was ready and prepared, Mario called Inko and informed her. They set aside a day for Inko to bring Izuku in and test his quirk, and at the end, Inko thanked Mario once again for his help. Time flew by and soon it was the day for the meeting. Inko woke up from a long and deep rest and was ready for the day. The sun was peering through the window, giving promise of a warm day. She walked downstairs and started on breakfast. As she worked on breakfast, Izuku woke up and came downstairs to the kitchen. He yawned as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and sat down at the table. "Izuku, honey, we're going to meet up with some of Mom's old friends this afternoon. Is that alright with you?" Inko asked as she cracked a few eggs over a frying pan. She had decided to go with American-style scrambled eggs and toast. As the eggs cooked, she pulled out a loaf of bread and a toaster. "Koch-chan and I made plans to play with each other this afternoon. You said I couldn't show him my quirk until I had some control over it." "You said last night that I had control," Izuku said in a sad tone. He had worked so hard to learn how to control his quirk, he wanted so badly to show it to his best friends. Inko made the mistake of looking over at Izuku, and saw his big pleading puppy eyes. Despite all her training to be a hero, to be able to talk villains down from fighting, hostage situations and the sort. Inko barely lasted a few seconds looking at Izuku before she broke. "Okay, Katsuki can come along. I'm sure they'll love meeting him too," Inko said as she turned back to making breakfast. She could hear Izuku doing a small celebration at winning the conversation. Inko couldn't believe how much she was wrapped around Izuku's little fingers, but she had promised her sister to be a loving mother. After breakfast, Inko worked on getting everything ready to introduce Izuku to Project Velocity, while Izuku worked to get everything for Katsuki to come over and play. Around lunchtime, a knock came on the front door, and Izuku giddily ran to and opened it. On the other side of the door was Izuku's best friend, Katsuki Bakugo. He was wearing a black shirt with a skull on it, and tan pants. His hands were in his pockets as he looked at Izuku with an unimpressed face. "Mom said you sounded pretty enthusiastic last night. So what's this thing you wanted to show me?" Bakugo said as he walked into the house. Izuku closed the door and fell into step with his friends. "My quirk," Izuku said, his voice starting to get fast. As he led his best friend to the dining room, a bounce appeared in his step. "That weird thing your arm did at school a week ago. I think I was the only one that saw that." I was going to say something, but the principal's action made it obvious that no one was supposed to see it, Bakugo said as he and Izuku sat at the table. 2 sandwiches were waiting for them. "So what's your quirk so mysterious? I bet it is not even cool, not like mine." Bakugo held a hand up and lit off a small explosion. "Katsuki, no quirks in the house," Inko said from somewhere in the house. Bakugo looked at Izuku with a confused look. "My quirks can be a bit destructive, so mom made the rule of no quirks in the house. To stop accidents from happening too often," Izuku explained as he thought back to when he first used his quirk in the house. Bakugo shrugged as he lowered his hand and went back to his sandwich. "If you can't your quirk, then how are you going to show me?" Izuku laughed, then gave Bakugo a mischievous grin and said, "There's a difference between showing and using. Let's have lunch first." This caused Bakugo to laugh, and they both quickly finished their lunch. Once their meal was eaten and they had put their plate in the sink, Izuku led Bakugo into the living room. Izuku directed Bakugo to sit on the couch, while himself sat on the floor between the couch and the ottoman. Izuku laid his arm across the ottoman and took a deep breath. Flexing his hand and forearm, Izuku felt a small tingly feeling appear as steam formed around his arm. He felt his forearm and hand change, expanding as he activated his quirk. A few seconds later, Izuku's forearm and hand had completely changed. Resting on the ottoman was now a purple and green long-range rifle. As soon as Bakugo saw this, he jumped a bit in his seat. Once he settled back down, he leaned forwards to get a better look. "What is it?" Bakugo asked as neither of them had really seen a gun before. They were still only 5 years old, and since Quirk had been inherited by 80% of the world's population, people had stopped carrying small firearms for personal protection. "My mom said it was a rifle. And get this, I can twirl my hair and weave them into bullets," Izuku said as he began to use his left hand to twirl a bit of his hair. After a few seconds, the hair solidified into a bullet that Izuku used to make a show out of loading the bullet. "I haven't had a chance to get much practice. It is not as easy to hide as your quirk." Izuku looked at Bakugo and noticed his best friend had a weird look on his face. "What?" Izuku asked as Bakugo stared intently back at Izuku's arm. "Midoriya, look at your arm," Bakugo finally said. That just confused Izuku further. Wasn't the whole point of this to show off his quirk? Maybe Bakugo found it weird to look at, or he found it really cool, but then again that described most of the quirks that were heteromorphic. Either really cool or really weird, but Izuku couldn't tell which way Bakugo was leaning. "I am," Izuku said. "No, I don't mean your right arm, cool by the way. I mean your left arm. You have a mark that wasn't there a few seconds ago, and Inko is going to let you get a tattoo." Bakugo slid off the couch and grabbed Izuku's left arm and rotated it, so the inner side of his bicep was revealed. Izuku looked at his left bicep and saw a marking that looked like one of those carnival tattoos. The kind that had to be soaked in warm water before it was applied. It was purple and in the shape of a bullet, and it hadn't been there before. "What do you think it's for?" Izuku said as he poked it. It didn't feel sore like a new tattoo should be, nor did it rub off like a temporary tattoo would have. "I don't know, but it wasn't there earlier," Bakugo said. At that moment, Inko came into the living and looked between the boys. "Alright boys, it's time to head out," Inko said. She had just gotten off a call with Mitsuki where they talked about Izuku joining Project Velocity. Mitsuki had joked about how Katsuki should join the program if nothing else to learn some manners. Inko ended the call by calling Mitsuki buff, saying that Katsuki was welcome to join Izuku in training. Inko helped the boys load up in the car, and then got in herself. After backing out of the driveway, Inko directed the car to the building where Project Velocity was stationed. On the drive there, Inko thought back to the training she and Kaina went through. In the beginning, it was tiresome. They trained more than just their quirks, their minds and body were put through the ringers too. Each day they were exhausted and they often fell asleep on their way home. Through that training, Inko became a strong woman, yet a life of a hero was something she never wanted. When she met Hisashi, she felt marrying him was the only way out of becoming a pro-hero like her sister. But now she needed to protect her family from whoever hunted her sister. Izuku needed the same training, to learn how to use his quirk and how to protect himself. Within the hour they arrived at Project Velocity. Inko pulled the car into a parking spot and got out, as Izuku and Bakugo were right behind her. Izuku looked up at the building and thought it looked like it belonged to a corporate business. He looked at Inko and said, "Mom, I thought we were going to meet some of your old friends." The Midoriya family had never really been that wealthy, nor had they been associated with upper-class workers. The closest was the Bakugo family and Maseri's work in the fashion business, but they didn't live a wealthy lifestyle, nor did Mitsuki Bakugo act like a rich woman. "We are," Inko said as she walked up the stairs and opened one of the doors. She then turned around and gestured for the boys to follow her. Izuku and Bakugo looked at each other, grins appearing on their faces as they took off after Inko. She led the duo to an elevator, and once inside pressed the button for the 5th floor. As the trio rode the elevator, Izuku looked at Inko and asked, "Mom, who are we exactly going to meet?" His mother never mentioned having friends that worked in a building like this. Inko sighed, then looked down at the ground. "Zuzu, do you remember that conversation we had when you first got your quirk?" Izuku gave a small nod. "Your mother knows some people that specialize in training young kids with powerful quirks, such as yours and Katsuki's. They help kids like you learn how to use their quirks and become heroes." From that, Izuku got a big smile while Bakugo got a fear one. Now that they knew what was happening, neither of them could wait to show off their quirks and what they could do with it. Yet it seemed to take forever before the elevator arrived on the 5th floor and opened. Once the door opened, they were met with an amazing sight. A kid, only a few years older than Izuku and Bakugo, with bright red wings, was flying around the floor. As he flew around, feathers from his wings shot out and hit targets of varying sizes. These targets were placed all around the floor, and the kid hadn't missed a single one. Izuku and Bakugo watched as the kid hit the last target with 3 feathers, and then landed right next to a table. Standing at the table were Fumiko, Mario, and 4 members of his team. Mario looked up from a monitor screen and said to the kid, "Well done, Takami, you beat your previous record by 3.5 seconds. Keep up that pace and you'll be on the level of a pro hero by the time you're a teenager." The kid nodded as pulled a blindfold down from his eyes. Izuku hadn't noticed the blindfold as the kid was flying around, making the kid's skill even more impressive. "I thought the targets were supposed to be in different places. A lot of them felt like they hadn't moved." Mario paused for a moment, then sighed a bit as he looked over at one of the workers. She flinched a bit, then rebutted with, "I haven't gotten much sleep because of your little side project. So sue me." Mario sighed again, this time pinching the bridge of his nose and mumbled, "Hinkido. What am I going to do with you?" The employee, now identified as Hinkido, then noticed Inko and the 2 boys. She got a big smile and yelled, "Inko, is it you?" before running over and hugging Inko. Inko had to brace as Hinkido was a forgetful person, and with her strength enhancement quirk, a hug from Hinkido could break a few ribs. Luckily Hinkido didn't squeeze too hard, and Inko was able to still breathe. Inko hugged Hinkido back and asked her how life was treating her. Hinkido just continued to smile, until Mario and the other present members of Project Velocity came over. After Hinkido released her, Inko bowed to Mario and thanked him again for his assistance. "Mrs. Midoriya, it is good to see you again." Mario then noticed there was more than one kid. One that Inko hadn't mentioned. "Excuse, but I was informed you only had 1 child, yet I see 2. One who does not have much of your husband's genetics." Inko chuckled a bit, then clarified, "This is Katsuki Bakugo, he's the son of one of my friends. I thought you might like to examine his quirk as well as my son's. I promise you won't be disappointed." "Bakugo? You mean that hot-headed loud-mouthed friend of yours?" Hinkido said, then quickly covered her mouth. She looked at Inko as if she had just killed Inko's dog right in front of her. Yet Inko didn't seem too worried, simply waving Hinkido's worry away with a hand. "I'm sure she's been called worse, and what she doesn't know won't hurt her." Inko could recall that Bakugo's first name for Mitsuki wasn't Mama, it was just straight to old hag. "Hello Izuku, Midoriya, and Katsuki Bakugo, I'm looking forward to what you will show us today. But first I would like you 3 to meet Kigo Takami. He's the second wave of Project Velocity trained heroes. If you're accepted into the program, then you'll be spending some time training with him," Mario said, as Takami walked up to the group. Takami looked between Izuku and Bakugo, then bowed and said, "It's nice to meet you both, please call me Kigo. I'm looking forward to training with both of you. Mr. Mario held you in high regard, enough to make his team go without sleep for a week." "Takami, I didn't," Mario said, then looked around at the members of his team. Many had small rings under their eyes, and their shoulders were hunched over. Only Hinkido seemed to be the only one with energy, but that might be just because she forgot how tired she was. "Alright, head home all of you. I told you to work fast, not work yourself into your graves. I can handle the evaluation by myself." "Sir, are you sure?" one of the employees asked, as it was unusual to be sent home this early in the day. Project Velocity didn't have a set-in-stone schedule for most things, as most of the timing was determined by how fast the trainee learned and improved. Yet to be sent home only a few hours after the business day started. "Yes, now go," Mario said, and not wanting to wait around for him to change his mind, the members of Project Velocity quickly gathered their things and left. Takami looked at Mario with a look asking to be excused. "Sorry Takami, but you'll be staying. If you are going to train with these boys, then you need to see their level of control." Takami didn't say a word, just gave a small nod. Mario then turned to Izuku and Bakugo and said, "How about a small demonstration of your quirks? Then I'll set up some small tests for you to go through. Midoriya, how about we start with you?" Mario prepared as he needed to act as if he had never seen a quirk like Izuku before, to make it seem that Izuku's quirk itself was unique to Izuku. Izuku nodded and lifted his right arm. Mario was ready to see Izuku contort into a weird angle, but his eyes grew as smoke appeared around Izuku's arm. The next second Izuku's quirks took hold, and his right arm was transformed, extending and building to a rifle. Mario held his breath as he looked over Izuku's quirk. It was so similar yet so different from Kaina's. The same sleek barrel design, but Izuku's rifle had a forestock and a body. It had no area for a magazine, but instead of loading a bullet through his hand as Kaina had to do, where the charging bolt would be on a normal rifle, there was a small slot. "Well, young man, that is quite impressive. How about you give us a demonstration of your quirk? Pick a target and show us what you've got," Mario said as he felt the joy of being able to correct past mistakes arise once again. This time Mario would have to play his card close to his chest to compartmentalize information, so no one knew more than they needed to. But if this worked out, Mario knew he could become head of a new hero program, one that could produce more heroes at a higher quality than any hero school could. Izuku looked around and quickly spotted a target. It was up in a corner, perhaps 100 feet away, and there were no other targets that were blocking it. Izuku took a knee as he gripped the barrel of his quirk with his left hand. Resting his left arm on his left knee to help keep his right arm steady, Izuku found this position to be very comfortable. He had complete control of where he was aiming. There was no sway in his arm as it stayed perfectly still. Mario noticed this too, as Kaina had often assumed a similar pose early in her training, whenever she didn't have anything to rest her barrel against. It wasn't a bad form, but in combat, it was a pose that left Izuku and Kaina vulnerable to almost all angles. Izuku lined up his aim the best he could, then flexed his right arm. A loud gunshot went off, causing everyone that could to cover their ears. They all watched as the green and purple bullet whizzed through the air and soon struck the target. It wasn't a bullseye, not even within the inner circles. Izuku had barely even hit the target in the first place. Yet Mario was still impressed. Izuku had only had his quirk for a week, and though it was clear he hadn't had much practice, Izuku had a talent for using his quirk, and through practice, Izuku could quickly get to the same level as long-range pro heroes such as Snipe. One day he might even be able to give Kaina a run for her money. A well-placed shot, young Midoriya, and with how short of a time you've had your quirk, you most certainly do have a talent for it. Now, anything else you would like to show about your quirk? Mario asked. Izuku nodded his head, then weaved some of his hair into a bullet. "I can weave my hair into my Amu." Mario nodded then said, "Now I believe it's young Bakugo's turn." Inko seemed to be under the impression that Bakugo would be fit for Project Velocity, yet that particular decision wouldn't be up to Mario. The HPSC Council would be the ones to decide whether Mario would be allowed to train either of the boys. Mario hadn't many interactions with Mitsuki and Moreru, only having met them for the first time at Inko's wedding. If he remembered correctly, Mitsuki's quirk allowed her to sweat glycerin, while Murasa's quirk allowed him to secrete acidic sweat that could cause small explosions. Mario got a small smile at what a perfect combination could result from those quirks, and if Bakugo had it. Mario was pulled from his thoughts as Bakugo stepped forwards and said, "I'll show you, old man. Quirk is going to make me the next #1 hero." Bakugo raised his hand in a cupped formation and let off a good-sized explosion. Later, after reviewing the security footage, Mario measured the explosion to be about the size of a large SUV. But for now, Mario got a big grin on his face, as fate had just handed him 2 extremely powerful quirks on a silver platter. Project Velocity's future was brighter than Mario could even predict. He had to train Izuku and Bakugo, even if he had to against the HPSC Council at the board. Mario was going to do everything he could to show the masterpiece that is Project Velocity. Mario cleared his throat as he turned to Inko and said, "Too impressive quirk. Perfect fit for Project Velocity. Something I'm sure the council will see that for themselves without much explanation. Let's have your return in 3 days' time and we'll begin their training." Inko bowed slightly to show her appreciation, then turned to Izuku and Bakugo. "Alright, it's time to leave, boys. But we just got here. We want to use our quirks," Izuku said. They had barely been here for 10 minutes, and barely had a chance to use their quirks. Mario smiled and said, "Boys, you'll have plenty of chances to use your quirks in the future, but for now the best you can do is listen to your mothers. Just remember, when you train without a direction in mind, then you'll never move forwards." With that word of advice, Izuku and Bakugo accepted Inko's hand, and she walked them to the elevator. Neither of them could wait until they could train with their quirks. Though their reason for wanting to be heroes were different, they both wanted to give their best to become #1 hero. They both admired All Might, the symbol of peace, and now they had the opportunity to train to become heroes like him. 2 days later, Mario stood in front of the HPSC Council that had been assembled to oversee Project Velocity in Tokyo, Japan. He had everything ready to indoctrinate Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo into Project Velocity, though he believed he wouldn't have to do much convincing. The security footage and Quirk files of the two boys alone proved how powerful they were and how well they would do in Project Velocity. And if it boiled down to it, he would explain how well the HPSC would do to have powerful heroes on their peril. However, what he was not prepared for was Madam President of the Hero Public Safety Commission and the President of Japan Kuma Renzo to be waiting for him. He should have been expecting this, yet he had hoped they would show. As it would be easy to convince the council, but the head of the HPSC and the President of Japan were a different story. As he met eyes with them, he quickly bowed and said, "Madam President, President Renzo. I was unaware that you would be joining us for this meeting." Yes, but Takuma had the mind to inform us of your two potential recruits. After the success of Kigo Takami, codenamed Hawks, your control over Project Velocity was reinstated. However, this power was given back with the agreement of checks and balances. Power which was given to myself and President Renzo, something you seem to have forgotten. Madam President said as she sternly looked at Mario. Her eyes were narrow and focused on Mario, with her lips pursed, showing her readiness to finally put Mario in his grave. I remember that agreement quite well. You are allowed to limit my control of Project Velocity, should it appear that events of the past were to occur again, Mario said as he sat down in his chair and put his briefcase on the table. Whenever Madam President took it upon herself to check on Project Velocity, Mario always had to hold his tongue round her. He didn't like he had lost his project to her control. Events of the past were to occur again. That does seem to be the future of Project Velocity, or were you too blinded by correcting past mistakes to see that? With you watering the idea of using Kaina Tsusumi's child, one Izuku Midoriya, to train him to become a pro-hero, and as it seemed that your methods and true intentions have not changed. How would you guarantee that events of the past do not occur again? Madam President said. True intentions, madam? Mario asked, knowing where Madam President was going. It was the same argument she had used to gain control from Mario. Was your original plan for Project Velocity not to train future heroes from a young age to become war dogs for the Hero Public Safety Commission? Madam President asked as she drew out a folder. Mario recognized his original proposal plan from when he was trying to get Project Velocity sanctioned. I never used the terminology of war dog. I believe the term I used was heroes directly overseen by the Hero Public Safety Commission. Their agency and actions can only be sanctioned by this council. Mario clarified as he knew that folder by memory, having spent many sleepless nights writing it. The politician's way of saying war dogs, and was that not what you got? Lady Nagant, the first hero from Project Velocity. Her skills and Quirk made her a powerful hero, and she obeyed the orders of this council without hesitation. I would call that a war dog, an obedient one at that, yet eventually her humanity caught up in the end, and because of that she killed my predecessor. Madam President said, a small smirk appearing on her face. She was playing it perfectly to make it seem that Project Velocity just need to be disbanded. In fact, that was what she had been trying to do from the beginning, as she had her own program to train young heroes. Yet it would never get off the ground as long as Project Velocity was still around. Madam President, are you insinuating that this council is corrupt and ordering Lady Nagant to kill others in cold blood without anything more than personal agendas? Mario asked. He would not have Project Velocity, a program that was nothing more than a program to help teach and train young kids with powerful quirks how to become heroes, named be dragged through the mud. Yet the thought of a military-style army could be formed from the idea of Project Velocity, but that was never the true purpose of the program. I am not insinuating anything of the sort, Mr. Mario. Madam President said, her voice becoming stern. She had a chance to finally knock Mario's legs out from under him, and she would not be losing this time. Project Velocity should be nothing more than a stepping stone for her program and her career. Madam President and Mario looked at each until President Renzo cleared his throat. Everyone immediately looked at him as he adjusted his collar. Madam President, I am aware of how hard you have voted to terminate Fumiko Mario's position over Project Velocity. You believe he was the sole reason the program failed in its first trial. Yet as I have reviewed the history of this program, I have found Mr. Mario was not the sole issue with the program. And like any new idea, there were bound to be obstacles to overcome. Mario began to smile. Mr. Mario, do not think that is justification for the failure that occurred. Failures were going to happen, but the one that happened was unaccepted, and could have been prevented if certain choices or actions had occurred. Despite this, I believe Fumiko Mario is still the best man to occupy his position as head of Project Velocity. His success with the young Hawk has shown that if nothing else, he and his program can and are willing to improve themselves, until they become what they were always meant to be. Thank you, sir, Mario said quickly, standing up and bowing. However, Mr. Mario, it does seem that you have forgotten the history of Project Velocity. So please explain to me and these fine people why training Izuku Midoriya and his friend Katsuki Bakugo would not be allowing history to repeat itself. So let us start with their quirk, Katsuki Bakugo first. President Renzo sighed. Yes sir. Katsuki Bakugo, quirk. Explosion. This quirk allows him to secrete a substance similar to liquid nitroglycan within the palm of his hands. He is able to ignite the liquid on command, allowing him to create destructive explosions. The more he sweats, the more powerful his explosions can become, though dehydration is suspected to occur sooner than normal. Mario said. What of his personality? In the video footage, he acted straightforward. President Renzo commented as Bakugo was quick to show off his quirk and act smug about it. He's a hard-headed kid, I will admit to that. But he believes he can be the next #1 hero, better than All Might. And he has the drive to back that up. In the short time since he has gained his quirk, his understanding and control over the fundamentals of his quirk is beyond that of a first-year reviewer. He's to the point where he understands how the positioning and formation of his hands can affect his quirk. In the security footage, Katsuki Bakugo can be seen cupping his hand together before igniting his sweat. He did this before he understood, which gave him more control of the direction of his quirk. With training from Project Velocity, I believe that one day he may begin to use his quirk to gain spatial advantage, and allow him to attack from any angle. More of an endeavor than an All Might, Madam President said. Dislike for the #2 hero was common among the HPSC, even the bottom of the totem pole workers. All his activities and battles created a lot of paperwork for them to do. In a way, yes, but I believe without the worst qualities, Mario said. And what's of Izuku Midoriya? He is the main concern for this council, as we have seen in the past what can occur. Lady Nagant was a powerful and skilled hero, so what words do you have to convince us that you should be allowed to train him to become a pro hero? President Renzo said. Thank you, President Renzo. Izuku Midoriya, quirk. Rifle. When using his quirk, Midoriya's forearm and hand transform into the barrel and body of a long-range rifle. This allows him to shoot bullet weaved from his hair at long distances. Instead inserting ammunition through his hand, Midoriya does so through a small hole on his forearm. His ammo count and range are unknown at the moment, and for his personality, I can explain it all in a few words. Izuku Midoriya does not know who he is, Mario said. Expound. Madam President said, leaning back in her chair. She had fought hard to have Mario kicked off of Project Velocity, now it seemed he had lost his mind. Even if he was allowed to train Izuku Midoriya, all Madam President would have to do is wait for Mario's plan to blow up in his face. In short, Izuku Midoriya does not know that Kaina Satsumi, Lady Nagant, is his mother. Nor does her sister Inko Midoriya know what occurred that day over a year ago. Mrs. Midoriya knows the story given to the media is not the truth, but she does not know the truth either. She believes that her sister was being hunted, and when Satsumi escaped, the people that were after her framed her for killing those heroes. This has led to Inko Midoriya believing that someone hunted down her sister, and now those same people may be after her and her son. She contacted me asking me to train her son and help him become a pro hero. I asked if Izuku Midoriya knew who he really was, and Mrs. Midoriya informed that he had been lied to. Izuku Midoriya with his entire being believes himself to be the son of Inko and Hisashi Midoriya, and has no knowledge of Kaina Satsumi or his connection to her. Mario explained. What if the boy was to learn the truth? The media has not mentioned Lady Nagant since the month after her betrayal, yet once this boy became a hero, the media of the past is sure to question his connection to her. Evidence will be brought to light, and the boy may come to question his past. He may question who he is and may seek his biological mother out. He'll have more than a few questions for her, and what do you think he'll do when he told the truth? President Renzo asked, keeping a neutral expression. Hiding the truth will be difficult when that time comes, but for now the past can stay hidden without much help. When Izuku Midoriya learns the truth, then it will be at an age when it will not affect him, Mario said. What do you mean? Madam President said. It shouldn't matter when it acted. When the truth came to light, Izuku's world would be shattered. Something Madam President was counting out, something she was going to make happen. Izuku Midoriya and his friend want to be heroes. To protect those around them, to see them smile. To be the next symbol of peace. When he becomes an adult and learns the truth, if nothing else it will motivate him to work harder, to be a better hero. Maybe even to prove to himself that he can be a hero, Mario said. How can you be assured that events will transpire as you believe them to? President Renzo asked. Belief. Belief that Izuku Midoriya wants nothing else than to become a hero. Mario said, looking directly at President Renzo. It was a few minutes before President Renzo spoke again, and with each second Mario could feel his heart beating inside his chest. In the end, President Renzo stood up and said, Funkyo Mario, you are being entrusted to teach and train Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo to become pro heroes. To ensure events of the past do not occur again, yet with the knowledge that if they do, then your life is forfeit to the government of Japan. Your work will be destroyed and your name branded worse than villains of the past. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I do, Mario said with a deep bow that nearly put his head through the table in front of him. The coming weekend, Izuku and Bakugo were brought back to the training faculty, along with Inko and Mitsuki. They rode to the 5th floor where they found Mario waiting for them. When they walked out of the elevator, he turned away from an overturned whiteboard and looked at them, putting a smile on for them. Good afternoon and good news, the council has approved the training of Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. Today will be day 1 of their training to become pro heroes. I'm pretty new to this, and Inko has explained a bit, but how exactly will you be training our sons? Mitsuki asked. She had never had an interest in becoming a pro hero. She had always chosen to be a fashion model as her dream career, and she didn't expect there to be much overlap. Mario gave a small chuckle as he walked back to the whiteboard and flipped it around. Anticipating this, I took the liberty of writing some stuff down. On the whiteboard were several different items ranging from nutritional balance to increased muscle growth and recovery time, to the amount of training that would be done each day to maximize growth in skill and muscles, while not damaging the body. Mitsuki and Inko looked over the board. Inko didn't remember Project Velocity being this organized when she was being trained. It seemed in the years since she left, the program had become more refined. The two mothers looked down at their sons, as it was clear they had a lot of work they would have to deal with. Yet they looked more eager than ever before. This is a dot. Inko paused as she tried to figure out the best word to use. A bit much, Mitsuki said, not worrying about finding the right word. They are only 5 years old. Mario looked at the board and saw how misleading it could be. Oh, forgive me, much of this information wouldn't come into play until later. Mario flipped the whiteboard back around. For now we'll begin with the basics. Learning what limits their quirks have. But you have their government quirk files, Mitsuki said. Before Mario could ask, Inko did so. A file can tell a story, but not the whole story. When I first joined the program, it was believed that I could only pull small objects to me, but as my quirk was tested and stretched, I learned that I could do more than just pull small objects to me. I had telekinesis in its entirety. Precisely, that is why it's common for someone to change their quirk file as they get older, as they come to better understand how their quirk works. We don't have that time, so step 1 is figuring out how exactly their quirks work. How does that sound, boys? Mario asked, looking at Izuku and Bakugo. They looked at each other, then back at Mario and began nodding their heads. They couldn't wait to learn what the limits of their quirks were. How powerful they could become. It got them one step closer to becoming pro heroes, and they were excited. And that is how their training began. Over the next month, Mario trained the two boys to understand their quirks and how they can be used in different ways, sometimes in ways that were unorthodox. Izuku learned the range of his quirk was a mere 200 meters, but through training and practice, he was able to slowly increase that range and his accuracy. He was able to place nearly every shot into the center of the target, something he always smiled at, no matter how often he got a bullseye. Bakugo focused on his quirk recoiling on his body, and how he could use the momentum generated by his explosion to move around his enemy and attack from different angles. They often came home Sunday evenings exhausted, and this caused their mother to believe their schoolwork would suffer, but every Monday they were up out of bed and eager to go to school. They paid attention in class and were the top students, earning the highest scores in each of their classes, especially PE. And then when the week was over, the boys were excited as ever to train. In the coming year, as the two practiced with their quirks, they earned a strong fundamental understanding of their quirks. By the time of his 6th birthday, Izuku was able to increase his range to 300 meters, and learned that he could hold a total of 60 bullets, and he could hold them for 2 weeks before they disappeared, and need to be replaced. While Bakugo learned that well, it was only the sweat from his hands that could be ignited. If you wiped the sweat on a different part of his body, he could still ignite it. With every new skill they learned, they practiced and trained until they had perfected it. Then came learning karate and judo. It was 2 weeks after Izuku's 6th birthday, and it was Mitsuki's turn to drive them in. She dropped them off at the front of the building and waited until they were inside. Once inside, the two boys rode the elevator to the 5th floor, where they found Mario waiting for them. Behind him were two people dressed in martial arts attire, both having black belts tied around their waists. The gentleman on Mario's right was of a large frame and tall stature. He held a narrow look on the boys, as he had his hands folded against his chest. His black hair was cut to right above his shoulder and slicked back as had to impede his vision. He had a withered look, with a scar that started under his left ear, and followed back his jawline and ended at his chin. The woman on Mario's left was of a shorter stature and smaller frame, but she didn't look less immediate. Her blonde hair was braided behind her head and went down to her waist. Her piercing green eyes made it feel as if her stare was going straight through Izuku and Bakugo. While the man was barefoot and had no gloves, the woman had a pair of fingerless gloves and socks on. Good morning, boys. I'm glad to see you are eager to train as ever. Today I would like you to meet your new instructors. Sensei Hikaku and Sensei Hitomu. Here are hero public safety workers, but they had agreed to train you in the art of karate and judo. You will train with your respective sensei, and then every 2 weeks you will switch and train with the other sensei. And when they agree you have the basics down, you will be trained on how to use your new skills in tandem with your quirks. Any questions? Mario asked, and when neither of the young boys spoke up he continued with, for now Midoriya, you're with Sensei Hitomu. Bakugo, you're with Sensei Hikaku. The two boys bowed and yelled, thank you for teaching us. Dismissed, now change in your uniforms, Mario said, waving the boys off to get changed. While the boys disappeared to change, Sensei Hikaku leaned over to Sensei Hitomu and whispered. Mario understood how eager they would be towards being trained. I could feel my frozen heart being thawed from their smiles. Well, don't get your hopes up. Everyone's eager in the beginning, they all eventually break, and then the real training begins. Sensei Hitomu said. The boys returned shortly after, wearing martial arts attire that Mario had set aside for them. Sensei Hitomu looked at Izuku and said, "Alright, job. Looks like you're with me for the next 2 weeks. Come with me." Izuku bowed, then followed Sensei Hitomu to a different area of the floor, where some padded floor mats were waiting for them. Izuku looked them over, then turned to Sensei Kuma to ask a question. "How are we going to begin?" He was interrupted as he saw a fist getting close to his face. He jumped back and landed on his hands, as if to springboard himself further away from Sensei Hitomu. However he put his feet back on the ground and began to stand. However, Sensei Hitomu was quicker and swept Izuku's feet out from under him. Izuku fell and hit his head on the pads. If it wasn't for the pads, he would have likely been knocked unconscious. Sloppy and lazy. Mario told us you have some close quarters training, but obviously you are still a novice. You need to train until skills like those until they become second nature. Until you can act as such without having to think about it, or you would have reacted towards my follow-up attack, and not currently be on the floor. Your reflexes are good, a positive side effect, no doubt from your enchanted eyesight. Sensei Hikaku and I's purpose here is not just to teach you the art of karate and judo, but to expand your mind in the art of martial arts. To teach you the skills to win against any opponent, and part of that is reading your opponent's movements and reacting accordingly. Sensei Hitomu said as she held out a hand to help Izuku to his feet. Izuku got to his feet and readjusted the shoulder of his guy, as it had begun to become loose. As he did, in his peripheral vision he saw Sensei Hitomu attacking. With her advice still in his ear, instead of jumping back, Izuku dove to the side and quickly rolled out of the way. However, as he sprung back up to his knees, Sensei Hitomu was waiting for him and put Izuku in a headlock. You were quicker and more effective this time, but a well-trained opponent knows the same move won't work twice. After every fight anyone could improve and become better, but those who can improve themselves during a fight are those who always find victory. Sensei Hitomu said as she increased the pressure on Izuku's neck. The edge of his vision was starting to go black, but he would still breathe. But this isn't like those video games you kids play. You're the only one that level ones. Will you learn about your opponent's moves? Your opponents will be studying yours. There are steps to mastering a skill. First there are the basics, improve upon those to have a solid foundation. Then comes advancing your skills, learning attacks that have more risk, but more rewards. But always be cautious, as there is always room for failure. Then comes mastery, your movements and skills are now second nature. You are able to react and fight through years of practice and training, your body and mind become one. Sensei Hitomu released Izuku and allowed him to stand. Now tell me what comes after mastery of skill. Izuku paused as he couldn't guess. Mastery of anything was supposed to be the highest level a person could achieve. I do not know, Sensei. Sensei Hitomu wasn't expecting Izuku to know. He was only 6 years old, and it wasn't something many learned of. Few learn what the final step is, and fewer learn how to achieve it. So when you learn what the final step is, that's when you become unbeatable. I understand, Sensei. Izuku said, with a bow. Sensei Hitomu gave a small smile. Before she retired from being a judo instructor and became a worker for the Hero Public Safety Commission, she had seen many people come into her dojo. All eager to learn how to fight, yet the longest she had seen someone stay as eager as they were when they first walked in was 1 week. Past that, many dropped out, and those that stayed lost their spark to learn more. She was hoping Izuku wasn't like that. Tell me, kid, what's your purpose here? Izuku was confused and showed it on his face. He thought it was obvious. Aren't I here to train in judo and karate? He didn't know that this morning, but that was what he was doing here. Sensei Hitomu laughed and said, you really are an innocent kid, job. Why are you here? What force drove you to get out of bed and made you come here to suffer through training that would make most grown adults cry? Izuku thought about it for a second, still confused, and then he understood what his new sensei was asking. I want to be a hero. To be able to rescue others with a smile on my face, as All Might does every day. Sensei Hitomu looked Izuku in the eyes. Izuku believed in the purpose he had just stated, but under that, he had questions as to what that purpose meant. What skills, what training, and what practice would he have to learn to fight while always having a smile on his face? Fanboy, aren't you? So is the rest of the world, kid. You say those words, but you are here to prove them. So let's start with the basics. Sensei Hitomu said, holding out her hand in a handshake gesture. Izuku reached forwards to shake Sensei Hitomu's hand. However, Sensei Hitomu grabbed Izuku's wrist, lifted him above her shoulder, and slammed him into the ground. Izuku tried to take a breath, but Sensei Hitomu was quick to wrap Izuku's arm with her legs, and then cut off Izuku's airway with her ankles. And step 1 is learning how it feels to be put into lock. You want to do it properly, you need to know how it feels to be on the receiving end. Feel how your body becomes locked and is now no longer able to move on its own. The force of your opponents becoming an immovable wall that you have little chance of pushing back. To learn this, for the next 2 weeks, you'll be like this. You with your back on the floor, looking up at the ceiling. Once you have that, then I'll teach you how to free yourself. The rest of the day, Izuku was put into different judo locks of bent arm, leg arm, cross arm, straight arm and E-arm. Sensei Kuma forced Izuku to hold each lock for 10 minutes, while instructing him to feel how the different locks moved his muscle, forcing his tendons to an extreme range of motion. How that prevented him from moving whatever was being locked and how it immobilized the other parts of his body. When Izuku got home, he was never more grateful to be about to take a warm shower than go to bed. While Izuku and Bakugo were both trained in karate, Bakugo focused more on karate and Izuku focused more on judo. Their skills over the 6 months improved greatly as their senses did not hold back, and by the next summer began, Mario saw it fit to have them being to learn how to use their new skills in tandem with their quirks. In terms of karate, Bakugo practiced adding force to his attacks with his explosion, while Izuku worked on the timing of transforming his arm to suddenly increase the range of his attack, and pushed his opponents away from him. For judo, Izuku learned to use the leverage created by his elongated arm to better immobilize his opponents, without having to use much strength, while Bakugo practiced using his quirk and the sound it generated to disorient his opponent for an easy takedown. While they practiced these skills with Sensei Hikaku and Sensei Hitomu, the boys found it better to practice on each other. So every first Saturday of each month set apart for the boys to spar against each and train with someone of their own skill level. Once this began, their level of progress grew better than it had ever before. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku possessing Lady Nagant's quirk. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Bye-bye, everyone.